listening to the Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. And welcome to another episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. So glad to have you joining me today. Today I am joined by my guest, Rachel Juelfs. Rachel is a friend of a previous guest, Jessica Mefford, and she and I had a wonderful conversation getting to know her and her motherhood journey. I will say that I know today is October 15th, Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Day, and that day is not lost on me, as you well know. I didn't know when we were recording this episode if I would air it on October 15th because I wanted to be sensitive to the week of pregnancy and infant loss awareness. And it just so happens the Lord has a way of knowing what guest needs to be during what time. And Rachel fit the bill, I think, in a tender and sweet way. And so I'm thrilled to have you listen in and hear her share about her 4 kiddos and her South Dakota life and National Guard and wrestling and all of the things. So without further ado, here is this episode with Rachel Juelfs. I am so pleased to have Rachel Juelfs joining me on the Motherhood Experience podcast. Rachel, thank you for being a guest today.
Welcome.
I don't know you, but you are a friend of Jessica Mefford's, and I'm so thrilled you agreed to come on and chat about your motherhood journey. Why don't we start with the ages of your kids and the stage of motherhood you find yourself in?
Okay. So we have 4 kids. Our oldest, Noah, is 12. And then we have Lucy, who's 10, and Arya, who's 8. So we had babies like every 2 years there for a little while. And then our youngest, Macy, is almost 2. So there is a little gap there.
Oh, wow. Okay. I want to learn more about that in a minute. How long have you and your husband been together?
For, I think, 17 years, since 2007. That's
wow.
right. Math is right.
How did you meet?
We met in high school. His brother lived in the town that I lived in, and I babysat for him, and he just became like a good kind of big brother type person to me. And
Sure.
He was an assistant coach for our wrestling team, and then he had introduced me to his brother, who was a wrestler from another town, and we kind of met. It was, I mean, I loved my husband for like 2 years before he knew who I was, so... It was love at first sight for me. He didn't know who I was. It's fine. But it was, I had a date for my junior prom, and he decided he didn't want to go with me anymore, like a couple weeks before my prom. And so I had told some wrestling friends. So I was a manager for our team, and he wrestled for his team. And I told my friends that I wanted, or some of the other wrestlers, that I wanted him to go to prom with me, but I was just going to call him on the phone and ask him. And they decided that wasn't okay. And so they just like carried me over to him, and I had to ask him. And it was it's still embarrassing 17 years ago, but
he said yes.
He did, yes. And I still remember the night before my prom, I went to prom in another town. And so on my way there, I called him, and I was like, I just want to make sure that you're actually going to show up. Like, because that would be the rudest thing ever, is like if I thought you were coming and you didn't even show up, and I don't even know what I would do. I was class president, and in my school, they do a grand march, and class president is announced first in the junior class. And so I just thought I was going to be super embarrassed, and he did not. He came, and it was wonderful.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that is a lot of pressure to know that you're going to be first out of the gate, and what if your date was a no-show?
Yes. Yeah.
My senior prom was the only school dance I ever went to.
Oh, really? I went to a lot of proms.
You were a prom queen in your own right.
Pretty much. I just had friends that didn't have dates, and so I was like, sure, I'll go with you, and it was fun.
I went to one dance in the 8th grade, and it was such a terrible experience that I didn't go to a school dance again until my senior prom.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. Do I regret it? No.
Yeah.
But my senior prom was also a lot of fun. I remember that there was a grand march, but I have no idea if there was a specific order to it, or if like they just saw the who was next. They were
Mm-hmm.
like, and now we're
Yeah.
going to announce these people.
Mm-hmm. I did not go to my own senior prom though. Our proms happened to be on the same night. And so I went with
Really?
him to his prom because at their after prom party, they gave out college scholarships, like randomly. But if you weren't there and they drew your name, you didn't get it. And so I was like, fine, I guess we'll go to your prom. And
Oh, wow. And did he end up winning one or no?
no, he did not actually, but
But
it was fine.
that's a
I mean,
risk you can't.
out of all the people I wanted to spend time with, anyways, it was him at that point, so it was
Oh,
fine.
that's sweet. So, okay, so you've been together since high school. Did you get married young?
Yeah, we were 22. So, at the end of our senior year, or in after our junior year, actually that summer, he did basic training for the National Guard, and then at the end of summer, kind of midsummer, after we graduated high school, he went to AIT then for the National Guard, and he didn't get back until a little ways into that first semester of college. Um, and so then we went to college for a little while. He kind of decided college wasn't what he wanted to do, and he got a really good job working as contractor for the National Guard, and so he did that. And then we got engaged. We'd been together for like 4 years when we got engaged, and it just so happened that both him and his brother were going to be deploying, and so we had to plan the wedding, which we wanted to get married anyways. Like we weren't getting married just because he was deploying. We'd been together for 4 years and stuff,
Sure.
but we had to plan the wedding before he left and before his brother left too, and because they were deploying at different times. And so we were trying to figure out times to get married. And of course, I wanted to have that beautiful fall wedding, but it did not happen. We ended up planning it for March because it had to be before both of them left, but it also had to be outside of Lent. So we're Catholic. And
Okay.
if you want to get married during Lent in the Catholic Church, you have to have like special permission from the bishop because Lent is considered kind of a mourning period, right? And so you don't want to have a celebration right in the middle of it. So
Right. Right. Oh, wow. So, yeah, March is very different from fall, especially you're from South Dakota, right?
yeah, yep. And there was a small blizzard. So
I mean, at least it was a small one.
yes. I have a friend that got married during that Atlas blizzard a few years ago.
Oh,
Yeah, that
wow.
was wild.
Oh, wow. Where was he deployed to?
He was deployed to Afghanistan, and he was deployed for a year. And so at our wedding, we had told everybody, because everybody asks, right, when you're going to have kids. And we said, oh, we're going to wait until after deployment. And that was our plan. And then the newlywed phase hit, and that was no longer the plan. And when he left, I was 18 weeks pregnant with our first son, our first child.
Oh, okay.
So,
Wow.
so our plan was, so in the National Guard, you deploy for roughly a year, and you get 2 weeks of leave where you get to come back home or time off or whatever you want to do. And so originally, before we were going to have a baby, we thought maybe we would just go somewhere fun for 2 weeks and meet up somewhere, but that did not happen. So we decided we would try to plan it kind of around when I would have the baby. And so I was due February 22nd. And on February 14th, 14th, he was going to start his journey home. So now when soldiers are deployed, when they're going to transport them anywhere, they go kind of in a blackout status and a lockdown status because they don't want people to know that American soldiers are going somewhere, right?
Sure.
It's a security issue. And so I had talked to him and he's like, all right, well, I'm going into lockdown. I'll let you know, I guess, when I get to Germany or something. And so I was like, okay, fine. And then that night I just remember watching The Biggest Loser, and I'm pretty sure I'd eaten at least one entire bag of popcorn, potentially two. And I was moping because it was Valentine's Day and I was sad. And I went to go to bed that night and I went to the bathroom and I thought, oh, wow, that was weird. And I was like, maybe my water broke, but I wasn't sure. And so I do the thing that millennials do, right? I Google, how do you know your water broke? And they said to lay down for 20 minutes and then stand up. And if you feel a release of fluid, and your water's broken. And so I did that for 2 hours. I did that and played solitaire on my phone. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, out of all of the days for me to go into labor, today is not the day. And so that was at 10. And so finally at midnight, I was living with my sister at this time. I had tried to live in an apartment when he left, and I was too lonely. It was not easy. So I moved in with my sister and her family. And so then on Valentine's night, I have to go upstairs to my sister's bedroom to wake her up and ask her if she could please take me to the hospital. And so that was fun.
Oh dear. And you're hoping you don't interrupt something on Valentine's Day.
Absolutely. The door was closed, so I made sure to knock first.
So you were in labor with your first all by yourself. Did your sister stay in the hospital room with you as you delivered?
Yep. I had been with her when she had her first 2 boys. And so I knew what to expect a little. I mean, do you really know what to expect until you've been through it? No. But, and so she was with me the whole time, which is amazing because her son is only 10 months older than my son. And so she was still nursing him and stuff. And she brought a breast pump and she pumped and did her mom duties. And then my college roommate and best friend at that time also came. And that's a running joke in our life, too, is that she just knows way more about me than anybody ever should. And so they were both there when I had him, which was very nice to otherwise you're alone and not fun.
And did you know you were having a boy?
Yeah. So we had found out before he left. And we had decided that finding out we were pregnant was enough of a surprise, that we didn't want any more surprises. So, and we had talked about names before. We had said Noah, and I really liked Jack at the end of my pregnancy, and I almost was going to just name him Jack, but I felt bad. So I did not. But when I went into labor, I had messaged my husband. So we had Facebook Messenger at that time. That's kind of how we kept in contact. And I don't know if he saw the message or when he saw the message, but by the time he had reached Germany, he had to pay for internet at the airport in Germany, and like a really silly amount of money just to find out if he was a dad or not. And so he was able to connect to the internet and saw messages and stuff. I don't even think we were able to talk at this point, but it's super crazy too, because if I had had the baby a day or 2 earlier, he would have been able to Skype in. And so he could have been there that way. But this was like I don't know what I did to somebody, but it was like just the one day. And so he ended up making it to the hospital 36 hours after our son had been born.
Oh, wow.
He's like this close.
So, and then he was with you for 2 weeks.
Yep. He got to stay home for 2 weeks, which is crazy to think. That postpartum period, especially those first few weeks, is a lot. And we were all over the place. We went to sporting events. We went to his hometown. My parents were down. People came and visited us. And it was wild. It was a whirlwind. And I still remember the last couple days he was home being just obviously in my postpartum hormones and being like, I don't want to share you with anybody else anymore. Like, can we just not go anywhere anymore?
Sure. Well, and he had to have been jet lagged, and then you're postpartum and you're both like probably just craving sleep and not getting it. And you also knew that, 14 days, he's turned around, headed back, and you're going to just be with this little tiny baby and you. That's it.
Yep. Yes. And so that was one thing too. I struggled really hard nursing my son in the beginning. And I still remember being in the hospital and struggling, and the nurses at that point were not overly breastfeeding friendly at all. And I still remember one of the nurses bringing formula into the room, and she's like, I'm just going to leave this here just in case. And I remember being so infuriated that I grabbed this formula and set it out in the hallway. And I was like, don't put this in my room again. Because I'm like, this is what I want to do. And you're not even letting me try. And I ended up having to use a shield to nurse him. I just needed a little bit of extra support, and it worked out fine. I've nursed all of my babies for a year. And but trying to, we had to do the thing where you have to like basically undress your baby to wake them up so they'll eat. And at that point, I'm a brand new mom, and I'm like, it's been 3 hours since he's eaten, and he needs to eat. That's what the doctor said. And it was a lot, and we were tired, but we made it through, and it was fine. And then he ended up having to go back like the day before our 1 year wedding anniversary. So
All
we
these
did we ate our
milestones.
wedding cake before he left, like how you keep the top of your
Right,
cake. Yeah.
right. Oh my goodness. So is he still enlisted today?
Yes. Yep.
Oh wow.
So he's National Guard.
Yeah,
So National Guard, like the motto, right, is 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. And
yeah,
so, and then they deploy for a year at a time, where a lot of more like I know Air Force really well. They deploy for just a couple months at a time sometimes, and more often. And then, but my husband is technically active because he works full time for the National Guard. And so
sure.
he is in uniform more than he's not in uniform.
Right. So okay, when he came home then how many months old was your son when
He
he came
was
home?
about 8 months.
Oh wow.
Hmm.
And were you able to like FaceTime or Skype in that time so that
Yep. So that was Skype was really big back then. So we
Mhm.
Skyped quite a bit. And he was on Skype like the first time our son had rolled over and stuff. And so that was really cool that he got to see that. And then we were able to do Facebook Messenger back and forth. So even if we didn't see the messages right away, they were there. So we can message back and forth a little bit. But he had to do, he was with a small group of guys, and they had to do some other smaller missions. And I still remember at one point in his deployment, there was like 11 days where I hadn't heard from him at all. And I was like, I was going crazy. And at that point, I was helping be a moderator for a deployment page for spouses of deployed soldiers. And so it was kind of a nice outlet to be like, I have no idea what's going on, and I'm trying not to think the worst, but you don't know. And it was still very much a hostile place at that point. And I had kind of met up with another one of the soldiers that was with him. His wife happened to be on that page too, and so she had reached out to me and was like, I haven't heard from him either. And then finally he contacted me, and he was like, yeah, there was some incident, and we weren't able to contact anybody for so many days because of a security issue. And so that's what happened. And I'm sorry, but um, there's a lot of rules, and I understand wanting to keep them safe. Like that's the biggest thing, is
Yeah.
making sure they're safe, but it doesn't
Yeah.
make it any easier on us
Right.
at home.
Is his plan, is he in it for like the 20-year mark or as long
Yep.
as he can stay?
He's in for 20 years for sure. He has 7 years, and then he can retire. Two of his older brothers are in the National Guard as well, and they both just had their retirement, and I think they're 45 and 42, and they just retired from the National Guard. So he can retire relatively young, which is nice, and then decide what he wants to be when he grows up. Then.
Right. Okay, so tell me about your next two children.
So after we had Noah, we had decided we wanted another one, and for them to be about 2 years apart. And I ended up having two miscarriages after him. And I still like the first one was a surprise, and obviously they're all surprises. But I didn't know anybody that had a miscarriage, or I didn't know that I knew anybody that had had a
Right.
miscarriage at that point. Nobody
Right.
talked about it, and so I just remember dealing with it on my own, and it is what it is, and that's just how it is. And so then after I had like recovered a little bit from that, my doctor had told me I could try again right away. Which now that I'm older, I know I would never suggest that to somebody. You need to wait, let yourself heal. Plus, your body's not ready either. Your body is still technically almost in a postpartum space.
Can
So,
can we drill down on that a little bit, because I think this is an important thing that a lot of people don't talk about, because it's a miscarriage is treated so procedurally
mm-hmm.
that it is not communicated that your body, mind, heart, they all need time to heal
Mm-hmm.
and rebuild after
Yep.
a miscarriage. So can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So we were still young at this point. We had Noah at 22. We're only 24 at this point. And like I said, I didn't know anybody that had a miscarriage, and so I didn't know how to handle it. All I knew was I wanted a baby. And so my doctor said, you can try again. It's fine right away. And I was nowhere near ready to try again. I hadn't dealt with the emotions of going through it. And I think so much so because I'd closed in on myself because I didn't know anybody else that had had a miscarriage. And so I just dealt with it on my own. And then we got pregnant almost right away again. And then we lost that baby. And that one was a little bit harder too, because we had went in for an ultrasound and we had seen a heartbeat at that point. And so, and then when that baby passed, like that one was hard, super hard, especially so close together. And at that point I was so frustrated. I was like, I don't know why nobody's ever talks about this. And I don't think it's right. And I don't think it's fair. And so I was blogging at that point, and I wrote up a huge blog about, and I think it was titled something like things that we don't talk about. And because it was almost taboo to talk about it, and especially because not everyone, especially with an early miscarriage, most people would not consider that the loss of a child. And for me, the minute I know I'm pregnant, that is a part of me. That's, I want that baby. And so the second one was hard. And at that point, even my doctor said, you can try as soon as you want. I said, no, we need a little bit of time at least. And so we had given it a couple months, and then I had gotten pregnant again. We weren't trying anymore. And then, so Lucy is almost exactly 2.5 years younger than Noah is. So it wasn't a very long amount of time, but once we got pregnant with her, I think the pressure was off too then, right? I wasn't trying to have a baby. We were just living and being ourselves. And I think that's a huge part too, is sometimes, when you stop trying, then that's when it happens.
Yeah. Was the first trimester of her pregnancy a little anxiety ridden for you? Were you afraid you would miscarry again?
Yes. Yep. I was working a really high stress job at that point too. And so I was nervous that, I had switched positions. I had switched from managing at a yogurt shop to working in healthcare. And my healthcare job was super, super stressful. And so I was always nervous. And then with Noah, I didn't have any morning sickness, any sickness really at all. Like my pregnancy with him was pretty easy. I had placenta previa in the beginning. It resolved and it was fine. And the only thing that was hard for him was his labor. But with Lucy, I was sick the entire time, and not throwing up sick. And I think that's why I get really self-conscious about it, because people are like, well, were you really that sick if you weren't throwing up all the time? And it's like, well, to me, yes, I felt nauseous all the time. I had headaches, and I just didn't feel good, and I didn't eat as much as I should have. And at that point too, I was so nervous to take anything to help with any kind of nausea, because what if something happens to the baby and everything? So that one was hard, being scared, especially for the first trimester. But then I remember the relief, after that 12-week, you have this huge sigh of relief, and you're okay, and you hope you're okay. And and at that point, I think, I just put rose-colored glasses on at that time, and I was like, all right, we're home free. And but I'm sick all the time, so it was fine.
Yeah. I just love it when people compare what you are experiencing with their own and tell you that you're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's my favorite thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow. Okay, so was your labor with her and her delivery, was that challenging at all, or was that pretty seamless?
It was a lot easier. It was a lot different. So before we had Lucy, my husband was working as a contractor for the Guard at that point, so like a federal job. And when I was 36 weeks pregnant with Lucy, he ended up getting a job in Brookings, and so we moved across the state. When I was
At 36 weeks pregnant?
Yes. And I still remember we had to come back and forth a couple times, right? We had to pack up our house and figure out what we were doing with our house. And so we traveled
with a 2-year-old?
Yes. We traveled with the car seat in the car, because you don't know when you're going to have a baby. And so the hospital bag and the car seat traveled back and forth with us a few times between the Black Hills and Brookings, which is 6-ish hours.
Oh, wow.
And I still remember researching like where on the, like we always took the interstate when we went because then there were more places to stop. I like knew like these were the places if we had to stop that we could stop, and especially because subsequent labors are much quicker normally than your
Mm-hmm.
first labor, and so I was prepared.
And so were you in Brookings when you went into labor with her then?
Yep. So I had had really early labor for a while. I'd labored most of the weekend. My sister-in-law had come up from Lincoln, Nebraska, and spent the weekend with us so she could be there with Noah if we had the baby. And finally, on Sunday night, she's like, I have to go back to college and stuff. Like, I have classes tomorrow. And we're like, okay, fine. Like, it's not happening. And I went in on Monday morning to see the doctor, and she was like, I don't know why you're not in labor. She's like, you're almost 5 centimeters at this point, but she's like, so let's just see how today goes. And she's like, I'm just telling you right now, if you come to the hospital, we will not send you home. Like, you're too far progressed that you can't go back home. And so we went back at like 2:30 that afternoon, and I was in labor with her, and Noah was still with us. And at this point, we're like, I don't know what we're going to do with this 2-year-old when we have a baby, but he's in the hospital right now. And we got really lucky. It ended up being move-in weekend at SDSU. And we happened to know a girl from my husband's hometown that was moving in that weekend. And so her and her mom came and picked Noah up from the hospital at about 5. And I still remember, like, I thought I was perfectly fine while he was there. And as soon as he left, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm dying. And but finally I was like, I have to have an epidural. There's no way I can do this without an epidural. And they didn't check me before they gave me an epidural. They just had him come in, and he gave me it. And he was still in the room. And I was like, I don't feel any relief at all. And like, I have so much pressure. I don't feel anything. And I don't feel any relief. I feel a lot. And they're like, oh, well, let's just see. And the doctor came flying in, and I'm pretty sure he was almost still in the room when like they were getting me ready to push. So they were like, we're just going to shut this off. And so they shut the epidural off. I don't think I got any of, I'm sure I paid for it, but I don't think I got any of it. And I still remember them turning to my husband, because he's kind of like at that point, like, I don't know what's going on here. And they're like, it's fine, Dad, just like last time. And I look at the doctor, and I was like, he wasn't here last time. And so, yes, I pushed a couple times with her, and it wasn't bad. And she was much quicker to come out than Noah was, but it was a whirlwind that I was not prepared for.
Oh, wow.
Especially because I was like, I have an epidural. I'm going to take a nap and relax. And no.
I was going to say, but like proof in the pudding that you can actually do it without an epidural. Who knew?
Yes.
Okay. So between Lucy and what is the name of your third again?
Aria.
Yep. Did you have any more miscarriages between the two of them?
Not between those two. Nope.
Okay. And so it was another 2 years?
Yep. They're almost exactly 2 years apart. Lucy's August 11th and Aria's August 1st.
Oh,
and
wow.
Aria was a surprise. It just happened. And there's all these jokes about the people in my husband's family that they can just have babies whenever they want. And it definitely is how ours has worked.
With her, were you sick as well?
Yeah, I was nauseous the whole time. So when I was pregnant with Aria, I was working at the Avera Clinic in Brookings, and I was working specifically with the OBGYNs at that point. And so that was super nice, because they would let me see my baby whenever I wanted to see my baby. The doctors loved to do ultrasounds, and it was a ton of fun, actually. But and I could turn to the nurse and be like, I feel really icky today. Like, what do I need to do? And I knew so much more about birth and women's health and all that because of where I was working. And so, but also knowing so much is I would get a patient that would call about certain symptoms they're having, and then all of a sudden I would be like, oh no, I think my hands itch now too. And just like a little bit of hypochondria, but my nurse friends calmed me down, so it was okay.
Yeah. And what about her delivery?
So I was worked up with her for IUGR, which is intrauterine growth restriction, and so I was progressively measuring at least 2 weeks behind every appointment, and so they do growth ultrasounds, and then they do stuff called the BPP, which is a biophysical profile. They score your baby out of 8 based off of their practicing to breathe and different things like that. So I had a lot of ultrasounds with her. And they weren't sure. They thought her growth was a little not as good as they wanted. So they planned to do an induction at 39 weeks with her. And my 39 weeks is on Sunday, so I had to wait until Monday to go. And I still remember I went out to the movies and to lunch with all of my nurse friends and my doctor who delivered me. We went to one of those Bad Moms movies or something on that Sunday, and we joked about how she had to sit next to me just in case I went into labor during the movie, and I did not. But I went in with Aria and that next morning, and my body has always been very ready to have a baby. I went in with her at 39 and 1, already at 4 centimeters. And so I wasn't sure what kind of induction they were going to do, but they started Pitocin. And the difference between natural contractions and Pitocin contractions is a whole different ballpark. Like, it's completely different, because with your natural contractions, you get a little bit of a break. But with Pitocin, it is on top of each other, one right after the other. And it is not enjoyable at all. And they kept coming in and upping it. And I was like, I feel like you're doing that really fast. Is there any way we can not do it that fast? And one of the nurses wouldn't bump me up as much when she would come in, because I think she probably felt bad for me. But the other one was like, nope, this is the rules, and would bump it up. And so I got an epidural with her because I was in an excruciating amount of pain. But of course, so I think what must happen to me is I get an epidural and I think I'm going to be fine then, and I relax, and then all of a sudden the baby must just come right down that birth canal. And so with Aria, I was like, it hurts. And they're like, it should not hurt. And I'm like, it hurts really bad. And so they say, okay, well, let's check you. And so first she gives me a bolus of my epidural, and I'm like, that didn't do anything. And so she was like, okay, well, let's check and see where we're at. So she checks me, and she's like reaching for the call button at that point as she's checking me. And she's like, I'm just going to hit this button. And if you could just not push, that would be really good. We're just going to have the doctor come over here. And so it was like 2 something in the afternoon. And so they have to pull my doctor out of clinic, which I feel terrible for, because I know what it's like to have to reschedule all her patients. And, but I'm pretty sure that nurse basically held her in until the doctor came over. And so she was a pretty quick delivery. And I still remember the anesthesiologist came back into my room to ask me how my pain relief was and stuff at that point. And I was like, oh, well, I had the baby. So it was not good.
Oh my goodness. And you paid for that epidural too?
I'm sure I did. We have very good health insurance. That is one thing the National Guard has given us. But yep, that epidural also did not work at all.
Oh, wow. So then there's 6 years, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that 6-year period.
So a year after we had Aria, I'd gotten pregnant again. And I still remember being really scared, because at that point I felt like it was too early for sure. And I remembered not accepting it at first, which then in hindsight, after I'd lost that baby, I felt like just immense guilt, like that I hadn't immediately embraced that baby and stuff. And I think sometimes it takes you a minute sometimes, especially when it's not necessarily in your plan. And so I think that that's a normal response sometimes, is to feel unsure. And so I was working with the OBGYNs at that point. And so we had done an ultrasound. We had seen the baby's heartbeat and everything at like 6 weeks or so. And then I remember being at work one day and just not feeling right. Like, I felt crampy and didn't feel good. And so they were like, oh, well, your doctor will do an ultrasound later today if that's what you want. And I said, yes, I would feel more comfortable if we did that. And so it kept getting pushed back, because it wasn't her normal clinic day, but she had like a couple patients in labor. And so finally at the end of the day, she comes back and she said, let's look at this baby. And so we go into do the ultrasound, and it's just me and her because my husband's at work. And we were very good friends too at this point. And so I think this was, doctors kind of learn to disassociate a little bit, right? Because unfortunately they see a lot of babies that pass or things like that. And so then being in that moment with her, she cried. I remember her crying when she realized that she had to tell me that the baby didn't have a heartbeat. And so like that showed me humanity. Like they're humans underneath that. I know sometimes people don't feel that way with medical doctors and stuff, but they have to be able to separate things. And like with that point, and I remember her saying something like, it's so different having to tell your friend that their baby is gone versus somebody you don't really know. And it's harder to disassociate. And so I was a mess, and I was like, there's no way, I don't want to pass this baby. I can't, like, it's too hard. It's too emotional. I had naturally passed both of my others. And so I was like, can I have a D&C? And she was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, if that's what you want, sure. But we were going into drill weekend, and my husband wasn't able to come. And so I was like, okay, we'll do it on Monday. And so we're going to do it on Monday. And then I ended up passing the baby over the weekend anyway. And so my sister-in-law had come over from Pierre, and her kids spent the day with us. And that was very nice. But I think one thing people don't talk about with miscarriages either is it physically hurts. Like it does not feel normal at all. And sometimes, like when it's an early pregnancy, it's like a really, really heavy period, but worse. It hurts. And so I still remember, I mean, my kids are running around the house and I'm in the bathroom, and but then not only that, but then emotionally it hurts, right? Like now you know what's happening. And for me, it's always a human.
Yeah.
And so that one was hard. I had a really hard time with that. We hadn't told a lot of people that we were pregnant yet, which I'm glad we didn't. However, I don't think that there's a time frame when you shouldn't be able to tell everybody, because you should celebrate the joy and the heartache with everybody. Like you don't need to not do one or the other. And so,
right.
And so that one was hard. And I told my husband, I was like, I cannot be pregnant again for a long time. Like I just cannot. And so, that's why there's a 6-year age gap there, which is crazy. After we got pregnant with our fourth Macy, people asked me if she was a surprise or a mistake or things like that. And she was 100% not. There's a reason that there's a gap between them. And so I even told somebody, I said, I've been pregnant 7 times, and I only have 3 children plus this pregnancy. So I don't know if you know that, but I'm sure there are plenty of other women that have large age gaps with their children, and this could potentially be why. Even if it's not anybody's business why there is that gap. And so
Right.
it was that was hard. I still remember somebody asking me that and just being like, first of all, none of my babies have ever been a mistake. Like it might not have been in my plan, but it was definitely in God's plan, obviously. And so I am fine with it to be this way. And with Macy, we had talked about at the end of 2021, we had talked about trying again. We're like, okay, well, maybe after the new year or whatever, and then we'll just see what happens. And that's all it took. And I got pregnant in January. So, but yeah, she was very much planned. Like my heart wanted another baby. My heart knew I wasn't done. So,
yeah. And what about now? How do you feel about family size now?
I am happy. I feel more like finality. I know that she is intended to be our last baby. And so I've I make sure to take extra special moments with her. And, I feel that way. And that's after Aria, I knew I wasn't done. My heart was not completely full yet. And I wasn't done. But now I know, like I'm perfectly fine being done. And I mean, if we were to have another baby for any reason, that would be perfectly fine. It would not be a big deal, but I'm more than happy at this point, and I don't need another baby.
Yeah. Even people who don't have large age gaps. My kids are 4 years apart, and my oldest was 3 when her sister was stillborn. and then a year later, her brother was born. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, 4 years is not that big of a gap, but
No.
I had 3 kids in that time, and you only see two.
Yep.
So it's crazy to me, though, the things that people feel like they're entitled to ask. Maybe entitled is the wrong word, but just the things or the way they phrase their curiosities, maybe.
Yep.
In your 3 miscarriages, your 3 oldest kids, like, did Noah know or understand that you had miscarried or
So
any of that?
not really when they happened. I do remember. So he was only 2 when or he was not even 2 when I miscarried the first ones, and I do remember him. No, obviously, he's aware enough to realize that I'm upset, and I remember him hugging me and stuff like that. And then when I had the miscarriage after Aria, I have a video that he took because he wanted me to come see something that he had built in his room. And I said, I cannot leave the bathroom right now. I have to stay in here. And so he recorded this video of this something he'd built. And he was like, isn't this so cool, Mom? Do you see what I built? And so I think he kind of knew that something was wrong. He just didn't know what. However, now that my children are older, so my older kids are 8, 10, and 12, first of all, my kids are very, very, very knowledgeable about childbirth and women things a lot because I was a practicing volunteer doula for a few years. And so they are and I'm a big believer in when my kids ask questions, if it's something that's not appropriate for them to know, then I'm not going to like give them the correct answer. But if it's something that they could know, like, yes, a uterus is where the baby is housed, and that I'm going to give them the right answer. I'm not going to feed them full of silly things. And so I still remember Noah asked for a cat from somebody, but he asked them if the cat could still have a uterus so it could still have babies. And so, like, they're very knowledgeable. And so they do know, too, that I lost 3 babies. And Noah's kind of at the age, too, where we talk a lot. And he even said something the other day because he wanted a brother so bad. And he wanted Macy to be a boy. And he was very distraught when she was not a boy. And everybody else we know has baby boys, and we did not. And so he was like, well, maybe one of my brothers is in heaven, I guess. And I was like, yeah, that's a good way to think of it. Like, that could absolutely be it. And but he's been asking questions even lately too about, well, has anybody else that we know have miscarriages? And so I've told him, well, yep, this person has, and my mother-in-law had, and like I told them about that and stuff. And I just think it needs to be talked about. And if I have to start with my kids to get the world to talk about it, like, that's fine, right? And they understand too, like, that is a baby that we lost and that we don't have here. And they've even said things like, my grandpa passed away a few years ago, and they've said things like, well, maybe grandpa's holding our babies, and things like that. So they
That's so
know.
precious. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that you are open and forthcoming, because I think part of the reason that, over the years, adults and the moms especially didn't talk about it was because what do we say? We don't
Mm-hmm.
even know what we're going through or experiencing. The doctor handles it procedurally. A lot of
Yeah.
women aren't told that it's going to be a physically painful, laborious event.
Mm-hmm.
They just assume that they'll bleed a little bit and it will be done. So there's so much not talked about in general, and then when you're just kind of going through it and experiencing things on the fly, you don't know what to say about it. I think
Yeah.
it's wonderful that you are open about it with your children so that they can just you know
Mm-hmm.
know about it and feel comfortable to talk about it later on in life themselves.
Yep. So I have a tattoo, and I thought about my tattoo for many years before I got it. And it has a little bit of something that symbolizes each of our children. And then there's 3 black sparrows on it. And those are for the babies that we lost. And so they say sparrows are the only birds who know how to fly home, always. And so, like, my kids know, like, this is for me, but these 3 birds are for the babies that we have in heaven now. And so I think even that is a visual thing for them that they remembered. I think it's nice. It's a good thing for them to be aware of that.
Hmm. So now that you have your 4 kids, what are some of your favorite pastimes, favorite ways to spend quality time with your kids?
So I ended up leaving my job. So obviously COVID happened. I worked from home for a little while for an orthopedic clinic out here, and I ended up in 2022 when I was pregnant with Macy. I ended up leaving my job, even though I was working from home. I left my job, and now I'm home with my kids, and that is amazing. I don't think people talk about that enough. That how amazing it is. It's also very, very lonely, like very lonely. And so um I love being able to be home with them though. Like we get to do fun things in the summer if we want, and I get to make sure that I'm there to pick my kids up from practice and go to all of my kids' events. And I have been sad I haven't been able to go on any field trips because I have a baby and I can't take her. But I do get to go on my first field trip with Aria next week. I did do ones with our older kids before, but that was when I was working and I just took the day off of work. And so I didn't have to worry about childcare, but like I don't have a daycare for my baby because we stay home all the time.
Yeah.
And so we try to do a trip every year, even if it's not very far. We did do a big family trip to Dollywood in December last year, and that was a ton of fun. And we try to get East River a couple times if we can. My brother actually lives in Brookings with his family, and so we did a trip over there and did the zoo down in Sioux Falls and things like that. And we love sports. I love sports. And so we travel around a lot to our nieces and nephews things, but then also Noah's been in wrestling for a few years, and he did football, and he is doing football now. Aria did wrestling, Lucy's done basketball, and so we chase that, especially in the fall and winter. We're super busy chasing all of those things, but we love it. We enjoy it, and that's probably my favorite thing to do with them is to watch them develop a love and a passion for something, and be it with wrestling and football and basketball and volleyball right now. Plus, my son is super into band, and so it's I think it's so different to be able to enjoy their childhoods. And my big thing is I always want to make sure that I'm giving them a childhood that they don't have to recover from, because a lot of people had
Say
hard
it again.
childhoods.
Say it again. Say it again.
To give them a childhood that they don't have to recover from. So we sit up and read books, and we cuddle, and we do all of those things. And I'm not saying like I had a fine childhood. Obviously, it turned out fine, but we didn't do extra things. My parents were very busy. I don't. My mom might have sat with us and read books and stuff, but I don't remember that happening. And so I want my kids to remember that we did that. And having 4 kids too, I try to make sure that I always take time for each of them. And so whether it's one of them gets to come with me to the grocery store or something, or I'm going to take just you to the movie this time. Like I try to make sure that they have their individual times, so that they know that they are special themselves, especially with having a almost 2-year-old right now. She needs a lot of attention. And so I try to make sure the big kids know, especially, and they know that I appreciate them. They're old enough to be super helpful with her. And so I always try to make sure they know that we appreciate them. But I never want to put so much responsibility on them that they feel like they're raising their other siblings, because that's not their job. That's my job.
Love that. I love that perspective too. And I do have to ask, with with your husband being a former wrestler, did he die a little inside when your daughter wanted to play basketball?
I think he's fine letting her do what she wants to do. So our Aria did basketball for a couple years, and then last year she was just very interested in wrestling, and so we were like, all right, sure, you can try it. And wrestling is the fastest growing sport in the nation. Girls wrestling is, and it's so different now
Really?
too than it used to be. Girls mostly wrestle girls now, and it's a completely separate sport in high school, and even like in postseason it's completely separate, for like AAU for state and things like that. She had a couple tournaments this year where she had to wrestle boys, And that's just because the numbers were low, so they combined them so they were able to get matches. And I told her too, I said, if you don't want to wrestle a boy, you do not have to. It is your choice. You don't have to wrestle a boy. You don't have to wrestle a girl if you don't want to. Like, if you don't want to wrestle somebody, you don't have to. And I still remember her being like, it's fine. Sometimes when I wrestle girls, I don't want to be that mean because I don't want to hurt them. But when I wrestle boys, I don't care.
Oh goodness, I love it. I was the mascot in high school, and I remember a little loving rivalry between the wrestlers and the basketball players. And the wrestlers at the state basketball tournament my senior year that we won, by the way, there was like a little mascot kerfuffle, and one of the other team's mascot like assaulted a mascot from another team. And then I was like terrified it was going to happen to me. And all of the wrestlers sat down in the front row, and they were like, we are here because if anything happens to you, we've got your back. And I've always just thought that was so great of the wrestlers to come to my aid at state basketball. It turns out it was only the one time and the one team, and I was fine. But it was nice knowing that they were there.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know why I felt like I had to share a wrestling story when that's as close as wrestling is in my life.
Wrestling is huge for us. Like, my husband's brothers all wrestled, and one of his brothers had gotten second at state wrestling, and then his son, our nephew Zach, who is the first Juelfs I knew. I used to babysit Zach before I knew Edward, my husband, and he won state wrestling last year, and so that is like a huge, like, gold star for us.
Wow.
Like, so even Noah he's got like a ton of pride, and he's like, oh my cousin Zach won state, and he just thinks it's the best thing ever. And it is. Our nephew Zach actually went into the National Guard, and he has billboards all over the state of South Dakota that he is on. And there's one right on our exit, and so we have to take that exit when we go anywhere. And then, of course, Zach is Aria's favorite person in the entire world, even more than her parents. And so every time she's like, there's Zachy, Mom.
So that's phenomenal.
It's pretty cool. We're pretty proud.
Well, I love it. And what a legacy too for wrestling and the Guard to just carry on through your family like that. That's pretty crazy.
National Guard is huge for us. My husband has 2 brothers that were in, his sister is in, and then we have a niece and a nephew that are in, and then my sister and her husband. My brother was for a little while, and my dad's is retired as well. So we are in the thick of National Guard.
Wow. Well, God bless you guys and your family. That's fantastic. And I have to say, Rachel, I have so enjoyed our conversation, and I, of course, feel like I know you so much better now. I really appreciate you coming on and being brave enough to share your whole motherhood story. Thanks for being a guest on the Motherhood Experience.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. Be sure to follow the Motherhood Experience on Instagram, and please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.